Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fourth and Short podcast. This is Cole McDonald here with my co-host Brian Kenny, and tonight our topic is managing sidelines, coaches, and players effectively in a five-person crew. Brian and I are both really excited tonight to have Todd Allen with us all the way from Arkansas. Some of you may know him from his training tapes that get sent around the state, so we're really excited to have him on with us. So, managing sidelines, coaches, and players. We know that working with coaches and players can be one of the most rewarding yet challenging parts of this officiating gig we do. While we need to have a firm grasp of the rules and mechanics, being able to calmly and fairly deal with coaches and players is an art that takes years and years of practice. So we thought no one better than Todd to come on with us, as he has had many experiences dealing with coaches and players and kind of get his perspective on things. So Todd, you can tell our listeners about yourself if you don't mind.
Don't mind at all. I am in the beautiful downtown effervescent Cabot, Arkansas. I've been officiating for, I say forever, because in Little League, I would play a game and then I'd hang around and try to umpire. So I've always been involved in officiating. I actually started out, though, in basketball. And my story's probably not really unique, but my basketball team that I was officiating with needed somebody for a standby in football. And I was a huge football fan. And I knew the rules because I was an official, but didn't officiate the game. And they asked me to be their sixth guy on their five-man crew in case somebody needed to work or had an illness or whatever. And I, agreed thinking, no, they'll never use me, right? This is just be something I can just hang around and say I did. And the day before the season started, their umpire dislocated his shoulder because he was too old to be out trimming trees, and he was out trimming trees. But anyway, so I got a call Friday morning about 9 o'clock that they needed me for a senior high varsity game that night in 13 hours. And I'd never worked a football game in my life. So I went from a spectator to an umpire in 13 hours. I didn't even have a uniform. I had to borrow stuff, but I found after a couple of games of avoiding being run over as an umpire, because I'm not a very big guy. I'm only 5'8.5". And if anybody says half, that they're closer to 5'8" than they are 5'9". But I boxed in college at 119 pounds. So unfortunately, I'm no longer at my boxing weight. But not a big, probably $140 at that time, as an umpire in a high school football game, a 5A game, which was, kind of maybe it was 4A at the time, but, it wasn't the largest classification, but it was close. So a couple of weeks dodging linebackers and big linemen, and I realized that I liked football way more than I did basketball. So I finished out that season at umpire, and the offseason got picked up by an amateur adult football league. And they were really just looking for somebody. And so I told them I was a referee because I want to be a referee. And I guess everybody wants to be a referee. I don't know why. But so I picked up this adult league as a referee, and they were playing the NFL rules. Well, there was a guy in Arkansas that was an NFL referee. And so he ran a dairy there. And I just picked up the phone, called him and said, "Hey, I know you know a little bit about these rules we're going to play with. Can you come help us?" And Walt Coleman, who years in the NFL, is just he's a great official. But the one thing I found out about Walt was, besides being a great official, he's even better human being. I mean, just a phenomenal man, kind of a role model, and, just a guy that was very successful and played college baseball and, was an Arkansas official in high school football for a long time, went up to the Southwest Conference. I mean, just a fabulous career. But, he just like, well, sure, why don't you guys that are working together come over to the dairy and we'll just talk some football. And I think he even bought lunch, or maybe I bought lunch. I can't remember. But we spent the day talking about football, and then the next night we went out and worked our first adult amateur football game. And the NFL rules are really, really difficult. But the clock operator we had couldn't run the clock. So Walt Coleman's running the clock. So he came in and did a pregame with us, and then he's our clock operator. He's not only running the game clock, he's running the play clock. And thank goodness for him, because we had no clue how to do it. So, that's how I stored. But from there, I went my second year in high school football. I picked up on a different crew because that guy's shoulder healed and he wanted to come back because his AARP card, still had a few years left on it. And I went to another crew and was working as the head linesman on this crew, or the line judge, I can't remember which one, but with a fabulous group of young guys. Tony Jew was the referee's name. And Tony was about 35, 36 years old, was a doctor in chemistry or something that I didn't understand, way smarter than I was. We knew the rules frontwards and backwards. We worked together 4 or 5 games, and Tony developed a pancreatitis. Something happened with his pancreas, and Tony got really sick on a Thursday. And we had a game at a 7A school, Central High School, that next night, which was, it's a 7A school. It's the biggest school. Central High School was involved in the 1957 integration crisis in Little Rock when the National Guard was brought in to integrate the public schools in Little Rock. So it's not only a huge school, but it's also on the national parks, and, it's a historic location. There's just a lot of history about, our country becoming what we are today started at Central High School. In the deep South, as we kind of integrated our public schools, but needless to say, a huge school, and we're going to work there, and our referee gets incredibly sick and is rushed off to the hospital, and we're panicking now, trying to find out, who we're going to get to pick up, and we need a referee, and, there's, even back then, 25 years ago, or however long it's been, maybe it was 25, I don't know. But anyway, finding an extra guy is difficult to do. But we needed an extra referee, and I'd just been on the crew 4 or 5 weeks, and I'd refereed this amateur league and had this guy, Walt Coleman, help me. But, I didn't know if I was ready for a 7A football game. But unfortunately, and this is a tragic part of the story, but it really brings home, what life's about. But that Friday morning, middle of the morning, this great man, Tony Jude, 36 years old, a college professor, lost his life in just 12 hours from, jovial and a great guy to no longer with us. And, suddenly football didn't seem really important. Having a referee didn't seem really important because, even though I only knew Tony a short time, I lost someone that I thought was an incredible human being. He was. And the other people on the crew really lost a dear friend they had worked with for several years. So, but here's where the story takes on a new twist. We called the assigner, and word spread that Tony had passed, but he picked us up a guy to help us, but he'd never worked referee. And this assigner had actually come in and filled in with me on my adult amateur crew and worked as my umpire. And he said, Todd, I know you've only been doing this 2 years, but you've had a pretty good teacher. I want you to referee this game. You take the crew out there and you do like you did when I was on your crew and you did that adult game. Just run the game. And I was a referee ever since. I went on and, a few years later, went to work NCAA football in Division II, was working as a referee, and then got a chance to get picked up and working in the Southland Conference in what's called the CFO West, which is the Mountain West, the Big 12, and the Southland. So here I am now in what would have been my 19th year. I'm on a leave of absence because of my real job, although it seems like football should be a real job. But it can't be a job because it's so much freaking fun, right? So you can't have this much fun at work. So, but as I made it to college football, Walt really had a passion for wanting to help Arkansas officials because the reality is we struggled. We were kind of behind the times. We didn't have the resources that some other states did. So Walt and I kind of put together what is now the Arkansas Association of High School Officials. We have 94 schools, and we create the football training videos that you guys referenced. We've been doing that. I believe this is our 12th or 13th year to produce those videos, and we've just been circulating them. And I get emails from all over the world. I get a lot of traffic from Singapore, but I get emails periodically from Germany and from Italy and places where they're playing American football. And it's rec leagues, it's high school leagues, even the Samoan Islands. I used to get I had a guy over there who used to send me emails the last couple of years ago. It's been since I've received one, but they were playing high school football on the island. So we get emails from all over, just questions or telling us about their programs. And, the love of American football is worldwide, and the web's so easy to reach out to people. So that football training series has been very successful for us, and it's really helped our officiating.
Yeah, you even get emails from a crazy guy in Wisconsin Dells who wants you to do a podcast.
I have been to Wisconsin Dells. I've been to that water park.
Oh, there's a couple of them, Todd. Since you've been there, it's grown quite a bit. And funny story, you talked about getting into basketball officiating. We use 5-person crews just like you do in Arkansas, so that's why this is kind of attractive for us to be talking about 5-person officiating. One of the guys on our crew resisted doing basketball for years, and there were 4 of us that did do basketball, and we finally talked him into it last year. And he's actually doing pretty well, and he's enjoying it more than what he thought he would. So we've been rubbing off on each other quite a bit. Being on a crew is just so much fun because it's more than just officiating, like you said, and there's a lot of challenges that we have when it comes to building rapport with coaches, and there's mixed reactions from one football crew to another about ignore coaches, only talk to head coaches, don't address assistants, and all these nuances to communication. And Todd, you've been doing this a long time, so what can you share with our audience about how do we build rapport with coaches? Because we have divisions. So in football in Wisconsin, we have Division I, which is the bigger schools, all the way down to Division 7. And then we also have 8-person football. So some of the Division I schools might have 10, 15 people or more on their staff. So you have all these people to manage. How do you go about building that rapport? And you get one chance to do that. What advice would you give our listeners about that?
Well, that interpersonal skill to deal with people, it takes on a lot. There's a lot of psychology, there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of positioning, posturing, and how you handle the team. Really, it kind of depends on the situation, right? So I don't take a berating from an assistant coach. I mean, I just don't. And the head coach, I don't get real involved in. And coaches are different. They're just like officials. Some coaches are, they're in your ear the whole game. They're behind you. And I've told coaches, hey, the players out here and the school pays you to coach them, and they want to listen to you. But I'm not on that team, coach. You're not going to be able to help me. I'm too old. So go help the kids. But that's the extreme case, and there's a time to use it. 99% of the time, I gauge the level of involvement the coach wants. Most of the coaches I know, but the ones I don't know, I size up. I don't chat during the game with the coach. I don't chat during timeouts with the coach, just because I got things to do and he's got things to do. So the idle chat can be detrimental. I do give information, and what I like to do is cover them with kindness. I give them information about fouls. If there's a foul called on his team, I go in, even before we had the 020 system, the radios. And I'm not a big fan of those, but they're very, very helpful. But I try to get into the conversation with whichever official's reporting to the referee, because he doesn't give the referee enough information for me. Holding 72, grab and restrict. He's going to give us a foul and give us a code, but I want to know the story. So I'll just ask the official after he reports to the referee, what did he do? Yeah, he grabbed the defender around the shoulders and spun him around. Okay. Which defender was it? And a lot of these guys I work with are so dadgum good. They can give you so much detail. It's like they can recreate the game in their minds. But, when you give that information to the coach, normally when they get agitated, they're starving for information. So I'll go over and tell them, yeah, coach, he grabbed that left end, spun him completely around, put the kid on his rear end. Yeah, that's what he called holding. Or, if I don't know, I say those magic words, but I say, well, give me some time. Let me find out. I'll find out exactly what he did. And there was a game years ago, and you guys may or may not remember. Cole probably doesn't remember, but Bernie Kukar was as an NFL referee, and Bernie was from Boston or New England or somewhere. He had that big, thick accent like you guys have, but I mean it was worse than y'all's.
Wait a minute, Todd. Hold on a second.
I don't have an accent, but you guys
you have a little bit of an accent, Todd.
No. Everybody here talks like this. But Bernie had a very thick New England accent. And he was working a game with Minnesota, and Dennis Green was the coach up there. And see, I can remember this so well because it had such a huge impression on me. And I wasn't even officiating at the time, I don't think. But I was probably officiating something. But they're in Minnesota is ahead in the game, and it's late. And whoever they were playing was running a hurry up. And the quarterback scrambles around the field, and this big defensive lineman chases him. And the quarterback throws the ball up the middle of the field, and they catch it, and they go for about 25 yards. And, of course, the whole offensive lineman is, 10 yards ahead, and they take off running. The quarterback's in pretty good shape. He takes off running, and this big defensive lineman has to get up off the ground. By the time he gets up there, the offense is already set. The quarterback's under center. They're going to spike the ball. And this defender tries to split the A gap to get onside before the ball gets snapped. And as he's going into the A gap, he bumps the quarterback who's under center, and the flags just go flying, and the whistles blow, and everybody and they call offside with contact unabated to the quarterback. So this defender, because the quarterback's under center, position to receive the snap, gets bumped by this defender trying to get onside. That's a foul. So Dennis Green, in all of his infinite wisdom, calls timeout and wants to talk to the referee. And this is, NFL mic. They got the mics up, those big shotgun mics. You can hear everything. And so Bernie he's going to indoctrinate me in this wisdom that I'm going to carry through everything I do in life, not just football. He goes over, and Dennis, of course, he's animated and excited, and Bernie's just calm. And he's like, this poor guy, he's running up the field. He's trying to get onside. He's doing everything we taught him to do. And he tries to slip that gap, but he's a big guy, and he can't get through there. And he just bumps that little quarterback, and you guys throw the flag. What's he supposed to do? And Bernie says these incredibly wise 3 words: I don't know. But if he does that, it's a foul. See, the coaches try to bait you in to tell you how to try to tell us what to do. Tell us what to tell our kids. No, I'm not what you do. I'm just what you don't do. So, Bernie, those, I don't know. But how many officials are afraid to say that to a coach when they ask a question? So sometimes they try to, I use the word pontificate. They try to pontificate what happened or what the foul was. And they don't know, but the coach knows enough to know that they're pontificating. And that really gets him mad. So I've used those words. I don't know. But I always say that I will find out. But if you can learn to say, I don't know, life's going to get a lot easier for you, because people will forgive you for being dumb. And I mean, it just works. And I don't know if I have the face for maybe I'm a great actor, but I am able to convince people that I don't know something, and they don't try to extract it out. So with coaches, don't try to dazzle them. Don't try to BS them. Don't try to pacify them. If you don't know, tell them you don't know. And then have enough respect to follow up at the very next opportunity that you have. And a lot of times they move on to something else. But they'll appreciate it at the appropriate time. You give them that information.
Well, a lot of times too, Todd, that you think about a football coach, 6 days a week, they control the weight room. They control 7-on-7. In the summer, they control nutrition. They control practice. But when it comes to Friday night at 7 p.m., they don't have much influence on officiating. And that's, I think, something that we have to be tuned into that and have some empathy sometimes for the fact that they might not know how to handle that. Because I used to coach football, and I think about that a lot when I'm officiating football. What goes through a coach's mind when it comes to the limited influence, and I don't like to use the word control, that they have on us on a Friday night for 3 hours. So it's just an interesting conversation that just made me think of that.
Brian, I don't know if you realize how smart you are. because I don't know if you realize how wise and insightful that is. And maybe it's your coaching background. Maybe you're not really that smart. But to understand, I've given that exact same example. I've said that the coach knows who's working in the snack bar and has to make sure someone's there to sell tickets. He's that involved in every aspect. And 15 hours a year, he loses all of that. Well, he still has to know who's selling tickets, but he doesn't get to decide what time the game starts. He doesn't get to decide what happens on the field. He doesn't even get to decide who walks off the field first. The officials do. Only 15 hours a year. All the rest of the time, he gets to do it. So that is incredibly insignificant. And you use the word too, empathy. That is something we're not taught. So I'm a student of verbal judo. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of George Thompson.
Oh, yeah.
His book, Verbal Judo, I've read that frontwards and backwards. I'm a huge fan. But, empathy is something that's very, very important to communication. And I also say, too, that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth because he really does want you to listen more than twice as much as you talk. Now, from this podcast, you may not know that I realize that, but it is the truth. But I use empathy and I use verbal judo. One of the most effective tools I used as a referee, and I still use it on the sideline, was I use a whisper technique. Have you ever heard of that? The louder you talk to me, the quieter I talk, because it is intrinsically difficult on the human psyche to yell at someone who is whispering. I don't know why. I don't understand it. But I also use a catchphrase that requires thought process and reaction. I'll whisper, Coach, why are you yelling at me? And that is a disarming, it's going to go one or two ways. For me, it's always gone well. But I do think there's a chance for him to completely explode. But so you kind of got to know when to play that card. But one of the things I've done all my career is run past a coach that was yelling at me, especially if I'm going toward the sideline. Because if he's out on the field, he can't be there and yell at me. And I will tell him, you can't yell at me on the field. You can come over here and get in the coach's box. And then I really don't care how much you yell. But on the field, you're not going to yell at me because he's just trying to embarrass me, right? So I run past him and go into the box and whisper, why are you yelling? And then he comes over there. I'm yelling because you're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing this. I said, you don't have to yell at me because I'm not going to listen if you yell. Do you want to talk or do you want to yell? Because if you want to yell, stay in the box. I'm going to go back to the sideline. Or if I'm the referee, I get to go back to the middle of the field. And then you can yell at me. I really can't even hear you. So, those type of disarming techniques, but, have empathy, understand what you said. It's so important how much control he has. And if your livelihood and win-losses and what people write about you in the paper depends on 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old men and women, how frustrating has that got to be? I mean, it's incredibly frustrating. I can't even when my kids were that age, I couldn't even get them to take out the trash. And that frustrated me. Imagine them having something to do with my, how successful I was in my chosen field. So I've always had a lot of empathy for coaches, and I always worked hard, and I've always given them information. And then I've always Bernie Kukard them when I had to. I just don't know. But if you do that, it's a foul, right?
Brian, I don't know if our listeners knew they were going to be getting a life lessons podcast tonight, but I think we can double advertise now. So thanks, Todd. Empathy, I think, especially when you were talking about the livelihood of coaches, it seems like all our calls, at higher levels, like could be someone's job, right? So how do you explain that to coaches when flag comes out of your pocket, you don't like it, but we still go with it? How do you explain to that coach that, gosh, we didn't get that one right. I was too quick. What do you say to them?
Well, I mean, that's a great question because I don't know that I'm ever going to that with a coach that fast that I'm going to stay with the call. I have always preached, and if you guys have watched my tapes, for me, it's always better to be right than look right. Something can look really, really bad. But if it's ultimately right, you get through it. You get to work another game. You get to work another season. If you look good and are bad, you won't work. You won't work at the college level. You gotta look good and be good most of the time. And by and large, even in our high school association, we're 90% right. But if I'm so quick that I can get to, we missed that, I'm probably going to fix it so we don't miss it. I'm just going to, eat that. But when you do have those plays that someone else calls and you don't know enough about it, or you know so much about it that you know it's wrong and you can't fix it. You just have to say, Coach, this is what we have. This is what it is. There's no way out. We can't reverse it. I can't undo it. We're just going to have to figure out how we're going to live with it. And, he's got to make a decision then. I always believe, and I teach this to new and old officials, the quickest way to get out of a play you screwed up is screw up another one. The only way to do that is to get the game going again. At some point, you've explained it, he's vented, start the game. Because it's very difficult to complain about the officiating when you've got to decide if you're going to punt, you're going to pass, or you're going to run, or you're going to, play your nickel back, or you're going to go in for, the strong set. Make him make coaching decisions, and he's got to quit yelling at you, at least for a little while. At least at the smaller schools. The bigger schools, he's got somebody else doing all that. He can continue to yell.
The next thing I wanted to ask you about, you've kind of already given us a few of your classic one-liners here, Todd. You're pretty much a pro at that. I don't know was a really good one. I'm gonna use that Friday night when I ref. We're in playoffs now, so we're in level 2. So the half the pool has been eliminated. So now these games just continue to get more intense. What are some of the other one-liners, or just short little statements that you like to use that get coaches who are maybe wound up, maybe they're, ultra intense, and sometimes we don't know what might have happened to them before the game even starts. Maybe somebody got hurt, somebody's sick, there was a tragedy in the family. We don't know all that information. So when they are upset or they're on edge or they're really intense, what do you oftentimes respond, or what do you say to them?
Well, it's the game's full of Kenny Rogers moments. I mean, you use that terminology? You know what a Kenny Rogers moment is? You've got to know when to hold them, and you got to know when to fold them. You got to know when to walk away. You got to know when to run. There are times where you're not going to be able to help, and you just have to use your interpersonal skills to recognize that. And in those situations, I'm definitely quiet. I learned really quick because I'm married, when someone is just yelling and when someone is yelling at me. If someone's yelling at me, I tend to get out of that situation. When they're just yelling, I tend to stay around longer because they're just venting. And if a coach is able to vent to me, then usually I can let him blow that steam off, and then get him back into coaching. I can get back into officiating. But if I cut him off and walk away, he tends to follow me and want to vent longer. So I just know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And that I can't express to you how important it is to know the difference between a coach venting and a coach yelling at me. I don't let him get personal. If anything comes out of his mouth with you, the ears go up. If we're facing each other and talking, and I'm from basketball days, I guess, I'm willing to give that stop sign. I'll hold that stop sign up, and I'll tell the coach, hey, that's enough. We're done. And now he's got a choice to make. And he's going to make the choice. But the last thing I've got, I got this whole tool bag, right? I'm like Batman on the sideline. I got everything. The last thing I've got, and the last thing I want to use, is the flag. I'll walk away. I'll let him win the verbal confrontation. I'll let him say what he wants to, as long as it doesn't get personal. As long as he doesn't embarrass me or talk about, if he mentions the words that we've cheated him, or we're doing things to him that, or none of the reproductive words, anything like that comes out, I bang those. I just talk, and I throw flags high into the air. I can throw a flag high into the air. I make a big scene out of it, and then I get away from him. Once I throw that flag, I run to the middle of the field and get with the referee, because I don't want to get him twice. I want somebody else to get him. So, and that has happened so few times in my career. Most of the flags I've thrown on coaches, it's because I've run into them. I just don't, things that are not related to football. So you think about this, right? We're going to move the ball from one position on the field to another for absolutely nothing the players did. When football officials do that because of coaches, the fans don't like it. The players don't like it. 9 times out of 10, the supervisor's not going to like it. It may be necessary, but we hate to do it. We want the kids to move the ball. So, when you drop a flag in the Southland, the Mountain West, the Big 12, and I'm sure in your association, you drop that flag, it is a huge deal. You're guaranteed to have a bunch of people look at the action that happened and make a decision about what you did. So I always, with the coaches and the comments and the confrontation on the sideline, know when to hold, know when to fold. I get away and try to get back to playing football. And that's the best advice I can give you. Figure out a way to snap the next play, and life gets better, or it gets worse. But at least you're out of that situation. Now you're dealing with a new one, right?
Well, I think that is a perfect way to end our podcast. I know that I really enjoyed this, and I'm sure Brian did. I'm sure our listeners are going to love hearing all these stories that you've talked about and all these different, things that you do to try to build rapport and, kind of last resort, we throw a penalty. So, Brian, any other comments before we wrap up here?
Well, I just want to know if you and I have this up north Wisconsin accent. I'm not sure what Todd's referring to, but it's interesting because you go out west and there's a kind of different accent. You go down south and there's a little bit of a different accent, and then you have the Midwest and then the East Coast, and it's all good. We're all doing the same thing. Todd, this is great. I learned a lot from you, and I always learn from your training videos, and you have a great voice, and you have some really good advice. So we appreciate that. Even if you have a little bit of a Southern, accent, you know how to say things really, really well.
Well, I tell the people down here when I got back, I've been gone 5 years, and I tell them when they ask me, are you happy to be home? I've always said, yes. So nice to be somewhere where people don't have an accent. So I appreciate you guys having me on. And, and if no one has ever said this to the guys that listen and the gals that listen to your tape, and no one said it to you, Cole, or you, Brian, let me tell you this. Thank you for what you do. For the young men and women that play this game, the role you play is incredibly important. It's difficult to do. It's kind of a thankless job, but without you, it's just practice. So for a guy that really loves the game, really loves the avocation, I appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Well, we'll wrap this episode of the Fourth and Short podcast up. Just want to give a shout out to all our crews still working in the playoffs. Best of luck on Friday and in the next couple weeks. We'll see you next time on the Fourth and Short podcast.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, guys.